You're going to love this next part. This part is just going to blow your mind. Are you ready? These reasons I've cited so far in this video are the primary reasons why that happens. There's others, but unlike most people in the world, I think about the SBA all the time because that's what we do. We assist small business owners with the SBA Natural Disaster Loan Program and the COVID-19 EIDL program. And I'm just thinking about the SBA's over-reliance on the tax transcripts that they get from the IRS. And to obtain those tax transcripts, you have to present to the IRS a form that's called 4506, Request for Tax Transcripts. Requesting the tax transcripts in the mortgage industry, where I spent 30 years, was a quality control measure to make sure that the tax returns that the applicant presented to the bank with their mortgage application were the real tax returns as filed with the government. Because people submit fake tax returns. It's a thing. The SBA requesting the tax transcripts to verify your tax returns that you've submitted with your natural disaster application is a perfectly reasonable quality control measure. But the problem, as I've seen it happen both with the COVID pandemic loans and in natural disaster applications, that the SBA loan specialists, who used to be called loan officers, now they're called loan specialists, they actually rely on the transcript to provide the basic information for qualifying your income for the loan. That makes no sense to me because those tax transcripts, if you've never seen one, I can promise you they're very difficult to read. The IRS, it's a real boilerplate type of document. I put it up on my computer screen. I put a ruler on the screen so I can get the little dots from the line entry all the way over to the other side of the page where the dollar value is entered or is not entered as a zero. So there's that issue. The other issue is how the SBA, on the My SBA portal, when you apply for a natural disaster loan, how they have you as the applicant create the basic information for the 4506. Now, before I go into how they're doing it, let me just say this. During the pandemic, we did videos, they're here on our channel, on how to fill out a 4506 because this was a problem during the pandemic as well, where the SBA relied on the applicants to fill out the form. And one thing we learned early on in the mortgage business when we started using these forms in the mid-1990s was the applicants are the worst possible person to ask to fill out this official government form request for tax transcripts. Which is why in the banks that I worked at for 30 years, we would get the tax returns from the applicant, and then we would fill out the IRS 4506 form, send it to the applicant for a signature. When it came back, verify that the applicant hadn't changed the form in any way, and then we would submit that form to the IRS to request a transcript. What SBA did during the pandemic, which in a small way they're still continuing to do today on the My SBA portal, is they have you, the applicant, prepare the form. Thankfully, you don't have to fill out the form anymore. But what the SBA does on the My SBA portal is they basically ask you a couple of questions about the type of tax return and the number that you used to file your tax return, whether it's an EIN or a Social Security number. The problem with that is, as I mentioned a moment ago, you're asking the applicant to fill out a form, and the applicants are not well versed in preparing this form. Secondly, you would be shocked to know how many small business owners have got no concept whatsoever how their tax returns are filed for their business. I know this because we've interacted with thousands of small business owners over the last 4 years. And just last week, we had a situation with a business where, and this is a very high revenue business with a proper bookkeeping department, with a very good professional running their bookkeeping department. And they argued with me about their business formation, telling me that they were an LLC and they filed a tax return on an 1120S, which you're allowed to do as an LLC. But all the documentation that I had that they had submitted about their corporate formation, including their tax return, did not support that statement. So you see how this all gets muddied. And here, if this business was asking the SBA for a natural disaster loan and the SBA is asking them to fill out a couple of questions about how they file a tax return, they use a Social Security number, an EIN number, can you see how this can cause all kinds of confusion? And in a phone call yesterday, they admitted to me that it was actually their CPA who told them that they were an LLC filing as an S Corp. Right? The last element here about how the SBA has an over-reliance on the 4506 and the tax transcript and the applicant responsibility to get that information is that once the tax transcript comes back, the file has been assigned to an SBA loan specialist. If the transcript comes back from the IRS, no record found, which is what the IRS does if you present a request for tax transcript 4506 form that is incorrectly filled out. Imagine going into a dry cleaner's and you have the wrong ticket, or you have no ticket, or you have the numbers torn off a part of the ticket. Imagine how long it's going to take the person behind the counter to find your clothing on those racks of hundreds of pieces of clothing, right? That's the IRS looking for your tax return. That's why it's important that the form is filled out correctly. First of all, the tax transcript might come back no record found, most likely because the form was filled out incorrectly. Here's the thing. The loan specialist, when having an interview, if they even call the borrower or the applicant, in discovering that the 4506 was created incorrectly, either through SBA's mistake or today on the My SBA portal through the incorrect answers provided by a business owner to create the 4506. You would think at that point the SBA specialist would say, oh, okay, well, let's get a new 4506 form so we can get the right transcript. No, I've been told by SBA loan specialists they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to request a second tax transcript, even though it may be the correct request the second time. They are required to withdraw the loan, which is a slick, gussied up way of saying decline the loan. And then the borrower has to come back and request a reconsideration. My suggestion to the United States Small Business Administration from a grizzled old loan officer whose hair is looking very interesting today is this. Do what we did in the mortgage business. Have the applicant upload a tax return and then have a team assigned to creating 4506 forms based upon looking at the first page of the tax return, which is where you get all the information you need for the request for transcripts, and have your professionals at the SBA fill out the form and then send that form to the applicant for an electronic signature. You have the platform, you have the facility to do that, and then submit that to the IRS. And please, one other thing, SBA, we have learned that a lot of SBA specialists do not contact the applicant on natural disaster loans. We have a client right now who has been declined for 2 natural disaster loans in California, one last year and one this year. And in both cases, he was told that there were discrepancies between the COVID application and his natural disaster application, but also, by the way, a problem with his tax transcripts. Yeah, that's in both of the declination letters. And when he hired us a couple of weeks ago to do a reconsideration request on the new loan, I asked him, well, what did the SBA rep say when they called you? He said, no one has ever called me from the SBA. That's on 2 different natural disaster applications for 2 different natural disasters. SBA, you have to do better. The SBA loan specialist has to call the applicant. SBA, implement that. Make that a thing. Make the loan specialist call the applicant and do a basic interview of verifying information on the application and then correcting that information because, again, you're relying on small business owners to fill out an application, many of whom have never applied for credit in their lives. In the mortgage business, the loan officer fills out the loan application, not the applicant. And then we review it with the applicant, and we go through it line by line, and then the applicant signs it. That's really how this process should work. The SBA has put entirely too much reliance on the tax transcripts, but also too much reliance on the applicant providing information for the natural disaster application, which then, through their systemic failures to properly interview the applicant after the fact, leads to these loans being declined. We're going to do a video in the near future with a report that I located that shows the disgraceful number of declinations, or what the SBA calls withdrawals, of natural disaster loans. And when you see the numbers, and there's a pie chart, and when you see how many applications are declined, you're going to be shocked. And we created a guidebook. If you're interested in purchasing that, click on the link in the description. But certainly stay tuned to our channel, and thank you for subscribing. Make sure you do that and click the like button, thumbs up that you like the video, and watch for more instructional videos like this. Plus, we have playlists on how to apply for a natural disaster loan.